Hello, everyone. This is Steve Huff. I'm the fight choreographer, and we'll be playing Mark Spector, Moon Knight, and Jake Lockley in Moon Knight Origins. And you're listening to the Into the Night podcast.
Yes, welcome back, Looney listeners. You are listening to Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast. This is episode 277. We are live streaming as we do for all the discussions on the Disney Plus TV show. You are with your Loonies. I'm going to say Ian, Adama, Joey, the Mega Man, and of course, is me, Ray, as well. So a big welcome to Ian and Joey. How you guys going?
Good, man. How about you?
Yeah, good. I'm pumped. We're certainly living in a purple patch for Moon Knight stuff. So I cannot wait. I mean, of course, as well. Actually, Ian, I'd love to chat about you as well. I know you've got a Moon Knight project too. Definitely check out that as well. But Loonies, we are here for, as mentioned, a panel discussion for episode 2. Summon the Suit. So what you heard before, previous episode or so, Rebecca and I did a reaction to the episode. Now would actually like to dive deep with fellow Loonies, and so have invited Ian and Joey to graciously come onto the show, as well as look at your feedback, the Looney feedback as well. So this should be a good one. Before any of that, a big thank you to all our sponsors, all the patroonies. Thank you so much for contributing and for helping us on this journey to cover Moon Knight. A big shout out to, he's now the absolute top tier patron. He's picked up the Moon Knight tier. So big shout out to Odin Sword. Thank you so much, Odin. And with that tier, Odin will get everything basically. So so I hope you enjoy the merch in the months to come, Odin, as well as checking out all the back catalog to all our kind of exclusive material. Big thank you also to our other patronies, of course, Drew Tombz, Daniel Doing, and Frank the Tank, as well as CLZ Comics and Dreamland Comics from Schoenberg, Illinois. So
That's
with all that,
to me.
That's
not far at all for me. That's wild.
Have you visited Dreamland Comics?
No, so that's in the suburbs. I'm in the city proper, and I don't drive, so that's like foreign territory.
Well,
interloper land.
It's recently been exposed that it's genuinely an online store now. I think one of the Loonies went there and it was boarded up, chained up, vacated. So don't go there, Loonies. Just check it out online. Save you the trip. Right. I mean, before we get into it, because I've got you guys here, it's been such a long time between drinks. I want to start with you, Ian. We saw you in a previous episode of ITK. Awesome. With Steve, the actor as well.
So long ago.
It was ages ago. There's plenty between now and then. I've been following your Instagram as well, so I'm not lurking. I'm just following. But what you've been up to, and perhaps I don't know, more on the fanfic film that you're working on.
Lots has definitely happened since then. On the plus side, so say Moon Knight Origins, the fan film we've been working on. We finally finished the main brunt of production. So a couple pickup shots, we have all of that, and now we're basically pretty much in post finishing it up.
Nice.
Going to be a little longer still, unfortunately, because our funds are super limited, and you know how it goes with indie stuff. But it's going to be done. So anyone who's been following, who supported the project, they can know Moon Knight Origins is going to be a completed fan film. At some point, it will be done. But outside of that, actually, another cool project to announce. So I ended up taking, with my DP friend, who, is the DP for Moon Knight Origins, we took a trip to Ireland, in which I went to Iceland afterwards. So that was part of my fall. But we actually also filmed a project that's kind of like another origin story, but for the Black Knight character.
Oh, really? Awesome.
Yeah. So we're kind of seeing if we can't try to tie a tiny bit in between the two origin projects. But aside from that, I mean, pretty much my life has basically, aside from that, mainly been working birthday parties, entertaining kids as characters.
Nice. Yes, I did see Spider-Man over in Europe on your Instagram page. So.
Yes. I definitely took my Spidey suit to Ireland.
Yeah. So is there any way, I mean, it might be just still in its genesis, but Ian, is there any way that Loonies can look to support your projects?
Yeah, I mean, I guess at this point, probably the two biggest ways, I mean, I need to do better updating the specific origins social media sites, but following those, the Moon Knight Origins social media sites is probably the biggest way right now, and just kind of getting the word out. Because obviously at this point we're going to be done with it after the show's finished, but hopefully we can kind of tail end that and kind of getting, you know, more word out, and even just sharing the trailers that we have on YouTube, just so eyes are still on it, so people know this is going to be happening. I'd say it's probably the best way at this point.
Okay, well, absolutely. There will be, again, notes in the show notes, links in the show notes, so go check it out. I'll add in as many of your social platforms in as well. So yeah, it'll be good. It's definitely worth it. And for those that haven't checked it out, I'll put that in the show notes as well. Go check out our chat with Ian and Steve, which seems like yonks ago, but anyway,
like last summer or something.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
I don't know. It's been almost a year at this point.
Oh my God, it's bloody pandemic, bloody lockdown.
Well, yeah, and I got COVID over Christmas, so that kind of slowed things too, and you know, lots of other people life stuff. So, but we're powering through, and now we're at the Moon Knight TV show. So timelines change.
two episodes in, can't wait to get into it. Joey the Mega Man. It has, if we're talking about it's been yonks, it's probably been eons since we've chatted with you, Luke.
Yes. 2019, man. I think that
2019.
I met you in 2019.
Okay,
but I think I was last on a podcast with you in 2020.
Oh my God!
So it was like right when COVID was starting.
Yes, yeah, that's it. And I think it just went a bit bonkers as well. Listeners, again, long-time listeners would know Joey. We've reviewed stuff together. This is the first time we'll review, of course, a TV adaptation, so very excited to hear your thoughts. Joey, as well, you did that. Again, listeners would probably know you from, you went through the whole canon of Moon Knight stuff. You released that as well in a podcast.
Yeah, I did a couple series or a couple episodes on Moon Knight, and like one was like a primer, one was just like an analysis episode of the Lemire run, and a couple other smatterings of comic book stuff, but usually I focus on video games, as you can probably see.
As well. I know you've got one very avid fan in the Rick Ball, Rick Souza. He loves his games. I'm sure.
Love me some Rick too. Also, I don't know if I could talk about this, but I've actually, like Ian, I've been cast in an official MCU role as Wolverine, because they're like, hey, your arm hair is perfectly fitting to Logan and you're a short king. So there you go. Like you know what? Like I didn't have to go through a casting process. They just hired me on the spot.
That is awesome as well. I can see it as well. Like, I can see the little pointy bits coming to your hair.
They're there.
There's enough hair there, Joey. So anyway, hang on. And of course we are live streaming, so we do have people, Loonies, dropping in their comments here. The Rick Ball, perfect timing. I'm on my lunch break. Yes, it is lunchtime here, hence I'm allowed to do this. Also, loving the Jesus hair, Joey. So well done. Get your thoughts in, Loonies. There's a. I'm not sure who that is.
Oh, that's me.
Oh,
spoilers! That's me.
Joey is actually sending in feedback as well as being on the show. This is a first. So
it's there. Like I said, I have to make everything private because my life in the public eye, it's going to be crazy. So
yes, of course, as Wolfie, as Logan, James Howlett. Well, guys, do you want to get into this Moon and Stars segment? Let's talk about Summon the Suit.
That just jump scared me. I didn't know that was coming.
I didn't know it was coming either.
That was cool as hell, though. I love that.
Cool as hell. A big shout out to CMK7, Chris, for doing all that. Yeah, he's a genius. So you know, we're trying to look semi-professional. So that is all professional, mind you. Yeah. So yes, Summon the Suit, guys. Oh my gosh, where do we want to start? A big hello to the Tombz fellas as well. Russell, hello, how you going? I'll pick Ian.
Yeah.
What did you make of this episode? Let's pick an aspect of it that you want to dive into.
What did I make of this episode? All right, well, I'm gonna try to start with the positive. So something I think I definitely liked that they started to finally get to in this episode is I don't mind the idea of a psychological kind of thriller approach, but I like that they kind of finally started to get into some action in this episode. Because, of course, in the comics especially, there is so much action with Moon Knight. And so it was like, okay, finally we're getting somewhere with that. That's probably my biggest positive I have for this episode. Aside from that, my thoughts are very divided.
Oh, no, that's awesome. I mean, that's good. Yeah, I mean, we try to canvass all thoughts on there. I mean, as listeners know, Rebecca and I, we enjoyed the episode. We loved it thoroughly. But yeah, I'd love to hear, like, you know, the reasons. I mean, Joey, before we get into some finer details, Joey, as well, you said you're a bit divided with this episode 2.
Yeah, I don't think it was as strong as the pilot, which I think is one of the stronger outings that the MCU has had in general. And even like, you know, even as like an adaptation, I don't think this episode was as strong. I think on a rewatch, it's both, you know, made the good better and made the bad worse for sure. It's funny you mentioned the action, Ian, because I think the action in this was kind of rough, to be honest. Like, there's you know, they're trying to sell Moon Knight as this like brutal character, right? And that's sort of the marketing, and he's like unhinged or whatever. But he's just beating the crap out of a crappy CGI Jackal, man. that's kind of, and it's the same CGI Jackal, front-ended and book-ended. So, yeah, that I'm a little iffy on the action. I actually think the psychological elements of this episode, or maybe not psychological, but the more thriller, like mystery parts of it, were more engaging to me, I think, than anything else.
Yep.
Yeah. It's like, I'm glad they're getting into action, but I think I do have to agree with you. It's not their best CGI. I feel like they rushed Moon Knight because they literally were like, November, we're done with production. Yeah. And then it was like, wait, you're airing it in March, which seemed crazy fast. I mean, as someone, you know, like, you know, I'm living in LA, you know, so I've been on many productions. I've made many of my own movies, and it's like with that much CGI. That's a really, really fast turnaround. Like, realistically, it would be like, oh, this is going to happen in like a year from when we finish production.
Yeah.
What would have made sense.
I think you see that in this show itself. If you look at this episode, especially compared to the first, there's a lot of cinematic things that are a little bit less high budget, let's just say. And I think, honestly, for the best in this episode, there's a lot of like I think different cameras were used for different shots. So there's one scene when when Steven goes to it's like right in the when he's in the office with the security guard. And then there's a scene later when he goes to the compartment. What's the storage compartment?
Storage,
and it's shot with like a fixed angle camera just stationary camera, and it looks sort of very mundane, slice of life, fly in the wall-esque, which I think is actually really cool, because this is the kind of grittiness I think that the show needs visually, and when you see stuff like that, it really sells the turmoil of the character and the realness of Stephen Grant being your everyday gift shop guy, right?
Yeah.
So compared to the first man, it's almost like different. I mean, obviously different directors for each episode, but you really see a difference of direction in this episode compared to the pilot.
Yeah. Directed by Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, so different from Muhammad Diab in episode 1. So potentially there's a big differences there. Those guys have much more of a horror background. We saw again a little bit of horror. I mean, not full blown like horror that I kind of was expecting before actually seeing any of it, but it depends on how far they can go with Disney Plus and Marvel shows. We might see that with Doctor Strange. But do you think, say, for instance, just going off the back of your comments, say, Ian and Joey, we've had comments made of, say, those lost time blackouts in episode 1 where you don't see the action. Over here, we see, for a part, invisible jackals. Is that something because of the budget, you think? Is that a shortcut? Was that glaringly obvious?
Yeah, but I think it's fun. I think that aspect of it is fun, and it's a Disney Plus show. It's going to have that kind of stuff. I mean, we all have to check our expectations when we're going into this, because at the end of the day, it is an adaptation for the Giant Mouse Company, right? And I mean, the action, I think, could have paid off a lot better, because to me, I absolutely adored how there were blackout sequences and then stuff happened. And I mean, granted, that was probably also budget, like you said, too. But the fact that you don't see it gives it such power. And so when you finally do see the whooping, it hits so much harder. And to have that fizzle out with like the CGI jackal is such a bummer to me.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, the value of that episode 1, just going back to episode 1 briefly about those lost time blackout things, it actually generates this, for want of a better word, this legend of Mark Spector, because you just hear about, or you just see what he does, but you see the result of what he does, but you don't see it. So it's kind of like the unseen protagonist, or like aliens, where you don't see them, but you just see the damage that they do, and they become kind of a force in that way. I enjoyed the invisible, the fight. That was humorous. But what did you think about that, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing I like about the idea of it, kind of like, at least at this point, from where we're at, being like, oh, are those things actually there? Is it really kind of gives this idea of when it starts to seem supernatural, it's like, oh, but is it really supernatural? Which I kind of like, because I always like the idea in the comics personally, where it never seemed more supernatural. It always seemed more, it was like, oh, there's certain things that like are just in his head, even as, in the comics with this idea of, he was like, oh, I have more power from the moon because of KHONSHU, but it's like realistically, like that could easily just be like, warlike adrenaline. So kind of this idea of like these supernatural elements kind of being in his head, I kind of like, versus them just being straight up like, oh, these are definitely 100% all like completely supernaturally real. And I kind of like that. So kind of having that idea of like having that mystery of, oh, but what's really going on? Then also kind of pulls it so it doesn't just become like a weird supernatural show.
Yeah, and we get that with two things. I think the first is we see the two women looking at Mr. Knight just flailing around in the street. They don't see the jackal, and we see Layla. She clearly doesn't see the jackal as well. So yeah, there's that ambiguity, which I think, which it's a good point, Ian. It does kind of emphasize the fact that we don't know. It's something that Mark is just seeing, But then again, at the same time as well, Layla throws a bottle at it, and it is literally there because it outlines with the liquid, and it throws Layla around. So there is certainly something there. But yeah, there is a little bit of an ambiguity, which I agree.
Which I think also kind of keeps the one thing consistent that it seems they're definitely going for, and that it's obvious they're going for that psychological thriller feel.
Yeah,
it's obvious that's the direction they've kind of been like, this is what we're pushing, but then also pushing a little bit of that Marvel humor, though I'm not sure how I'm feeling about that yet, because right now for me that humor is just feeling too Spider-Man.
Okay.
Like, I'm not against humor with Moon Knight. It just to me it just doesn't feel like Moon Knight humor.
Right.
Yeah.
I hear that a lot, honestly. And sometimes I think it's really good. Like maybe I'm biased because I love the character, obviously. But you know, I think it's one of the funnier entries when it hits, and I think there's something like weirdly goofy early 2000s humor about like the accent that Oscar Isaac puts on. There's like it's this weird like quantum irony poisoning I have with the humor in the show. I don't know how to describe it, but I think like the quips are good. I just wish it was more like dark humor. You know, I don't mean that in like a let's make it edgy just to be edgy kind of way, but I wish that there was like, there's humor even in the Houston run, which is the most grim dark of all the runs, I think. And I think that they could have maybe incorporated that a little bit better, but also I think the surrealness of having Moon Knight on a show this big with an audience this big, I get it. I get it, right? Like it's I don't think it ever becomes distracting though. Ray, did you ever feel like you were being taken out of the character with it?
No, no, not at all. Well, a little, yeah. Well, actually, having said that, a little bit. The Stephen Grant stuff, and we've covered this, I guess, with the introduction in episode 1, which was a little bit of a heel turn for some comic book fans, of course. The Stephen Grant humor I love because that kind of humor is really up my alley. That sort of not trying to be funny, but I am funny kind of thing, which is, I think, is Oscar Isaac described it. The Mr. Knight thing, and we might just get into now, like the Mr. Knight thing. One of the pointy ends that Rebecca and I, highlighted, his humor. I was just trying to find the comments there. Someone commented, one of the Loonies commented that, this seems like straight out of Deadpool. Mr. Knight is not like this in the comics. I found that a little jarring. Also because, when we first watched it, we weren't kind of given a soft intro to it. Like, by the way that the trailers gave us a soft intro into Stephen Grant, and the suit, all those differences you can kind of get used to slowly. When I first saw episode 2, I was like, oh, Mr. Knight, oh, okay, he's acting a bit weird. But yeah, is this the sort of stuff that you're alluding to, Ian, with the Spider-Man kind of humor? Because I could see that. Yeah,
I think it was much more there because the direction they went with Stephen Grant, which I mean, I completely see why they did that. It makes a lot more sense because it's very consistent with the direction they went with him, just this being this very awkward, kind of geeky-ass character, which I very much understand because that's very often how I've been in my life. And it can very often just end up being, you just do something naturally and it's just weirdly comedic for no intentional reasons. Like, I've experienced that personally with myself, with people in my own life. So it's like, I completely understand that. But it did take me a little bit of adjusting to kind of get used to Stephen Grant, just because it was like, this isn't quite the direction. But especially definitely when Mr. Knight came in, it was like, this is not Mr. Knight. Like, it was, the humor just felt way off because it also didn't feel like his character would be humorous. And it just kind of was like, oh, this is Mr. Knight, but oh, it's actually Stephen Grant, not Mr. Knight.
I mean, I see why they tried to play it off for laughs. There needed to be some kind of like very mainstream levity in there, right? As fans of the comics, it's very easy for us to be like, oh, that's not how Mr. Knight is, and I agree, it's a little disjointed for sure. But my thing too is like, remember that Moon Knight is already an established character in the show. Mr. Knight is not. This is Mr. Knight's hero's journey. He's picking up that Excalibur or batons, and he's gonna. I feel like there will be development with Mr. Knight as time goes on. And I, like Ray, I have seen the next 2 episodes, so it's hard to not talk about this without teasing.
Of course, I haven't, so I'm like, I'm blind. Going forward, and I'm like, okay. And I mean, the plus is like you've seen the next 2, but it's kind of also like, well, then what are we going to get into when we get to the final 2? Because that's for everybody. And Disney so far on their shows has kind of had a weird track record where most of the shows, most fans, even if they're just general Marvel fans, it's kind of been like a show's either started weak and ended strong for them, or the reverse. So I'm kind of curious, like even for myself, to see is like, all right, is this kind of like a weak start for me, and I'm gonna love like the end of it, or am I still gonna be divided till the end? I'm kind of curious to see, and since it's a very short series, it's only 4 more episodes, it'll be kind of.
You'll be very surprised when the Ninja Turtles show up. It's really messed up, dude. I don't understand why they did that. I mean, that's how you're going to tie the universes together. But
it's a bit of a
pull something out of the hat.
There's a really good comment here, and it's saying, "Is it safe to say that Steven in the suit is not Mr. Knight?" I don't think it is. Even
that's a good point.
Yeah, it's like to me that's sort of like I don't want to go so far as to say Mr. Knight is an alter, because I definitely don't think it is. It just costumed Steven, and I think that alone is sort of myopic, right? Because I always felt like the costume or the costumed personas were their own unique personas, and I don't really think alters. Sorry, I don't really think that this show does a very good job of making that distinction clear, and I think it trips over itself a little bit.
I don't think they're aiming for that, which is a big difference. It is, as you're saying, because I left some feedback for another podcast about it, and in the comics they are seen as their separate kind of identities, whereas now it seems that they are associated with the other identities. I like that comment that just because Steven is in the suit doesn't necessarily mean that is the Mr. Knight, because we do see Mark in the Mr. Knight suit as well in the reflections. So, but I have a feeling though that they are associating them with the identities. We'll have to see. I posited the theory that potentially Steven will give us maybe a sleuth Mr. Knight, which he is kind of in the comics, not as hard-boiled. Hard-boiled guy. But not as much a kick-ass guy in that issue 5 of the Ellis run, but maybe more of that detective, because he's got the knowledge. It's established that he's more well-versed in the Egyptology than Mark when he talks to Layla. So maybe that might be the route they're going for. I'm not sure. So Mr. Knight is largely, that was a bit of a hard pill to swallow, I guess, for a lot of people as well. How about sorry?
I was going to say, now I will say I do like the design of the Mr. Knight suit.
That
one I did like. I'm still not a huge fan though of the others.
Fair enough.
I have personally nicknamed it Mummy Knight.
Well, they've definitely taken. Alex Ross's. I think there's a direct. He's been thanked in the credits as well, and Rebecca and I reckon it is from that Earth X, where it is a mummy Moon Knight, and that's I think where they're taking the direct influence from. Jeremy Slater has said as well, like we wanted a point of difference for Moon Knight, and he loved that Alex Ross interpretation, so that's the kind of way they went. I think I wouldn't mind it as much if it actually looked much more like that comic look, where it actually just looked like bandages, but this was like bandages, but now let's actually try to give him a suit over the bandages, and that's what
it's the CGI in it. I actually really like the design of it. I just don't like how the CGI integrates with everything else, to be honest. Man, I keep coming back to CGI, don't I?
Well, I mean, I'm sure it was rushed CGI. Honestly, I know people who work visual effects, and visual effects is extremely time consuming.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you rush it and go, like 6 months later we're going to release this thing, then yeah, your CGI is not going to be as good as it could be.
And I also think we're completely misunderstanding something. This episode is called Summon the Soup because there's that whole scene with him eating soup with Arthur. Yeah. And by the way, I hate how Steven eats soup, like the way he holds. He's like he's eating it in prison. Like he's protecting his soup from everybody else. Like,
he's certainly an awkward fellow. So what I'd liked was the brief glimpses of Mark that we're seeing in that CCT footage. Oscar does a really great job, and also in the reflections, as in discerning the two different identities. I mean, he looks like a completely different character when he's as Mark. But we go into also Mark's origins as well. So one of the things I flagged as one of the highlights for me was this fist pumping. Yeah, they're going straight from the comics when we get the two detectives, Fitzgerald and Kennedy, talking about Mark's past and how he's involved in this dig site, execution of archaeologists. I was just like, yep, that's perfect. But what do you guys think of this introduction? We're getting more and more on Mark Spector. How are you seeing that kind of unfold?
Yeah, I mean, I am happy that it's obvious that they're at least taking some very definite stuff from the Mark origin and not just completely changing that, which is awesome. Especially, as I'm working on an origin fan film. It was like, okay, well, that's something that, can at least, connect. But it's also kind of fun to kind of see, like, especially to see if they go more into it down the road. It'd be kind of cool to see, okay, well, how did they go about it with all their money? Whereas, how did I was able to go about it with my no money? And kind of, for me, that's just kind of like a thing in my mind, since I'm, working on this fan film that we were trying to get out before the show came out. But, at least finished it before the show came out, at least production. But kind of seeing that, like, okay, they're going to have the Mark origin story, and at least we know, like, at least one character is going to be how they were in the comics, is something that I'm like, okay, that's good, because that kind of at least shows they weren't just ignoring the comics.
Yeah, Oscar Isaac's tone, just Oscar Isaac, like the Oscar, like inside Llewyn Davis, the Oscar Isaac that everybody knows, right, is perfect for Mark Spector. Like when there's that scene when he's toward the end of the episode when he's like talking to himself in the mirror, or talking to his altar in the mirror, which is very evocative of the Houston Finch run, by the way. I was looking at this, like the framing of it and like the colors is very Finch. But when that whole scene is like, bro, that's the Mark Spector that I wanted from the day I read a Moon Knight comic, right? And it's just such a perfect thing. And I hope that it continues that level of like positivity, because the way that they left it in this episode, it could go either way. It could either be like, oh, he's just messed up and he's drinking around, like it could just be very generic, or it could be very engaging, which I think Oscar Isaac is doing a wonderful job so far in this role. Even as Stephen Grant, honestly, like there's something very compelling about his performance as that. And I'm just want to see Jake, man.
Well, I mean, us comic book fans know about that identity. MCU fans or new fans to Moon Knight may not know that as well. But yeah, Mark is. I love seeing his bunker, which was that storage facility. It's very military, very murk. And yeah, as you said, Joey, that conversation he has with Steven, he seems weary, like I've been doing this for a long time, being the avatar of KHONSHU. Just breathe through it. He knows how it feels to be stuck, like, with the other alters as well. He's got that kind of tough guy attitude, and it feels by the end of this episode, I'm not sure if you feel the same as well, Ian and Joey, that we're transitioning to now more of a Mark.
The Mark episode.
The Mark episodes as well. So people that don't like Steven, there's a light at the end of the tunnel there. But yeah, Ian, what were your thoughts on the depiction of Mark?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think also, I think he was saying Oscar Isaac, I think he does fall more naturally as an actor into the Mark character than he does with the Steven. Like, so something as myself as a actor who naturally falls into a lot of more awkward type roles. I mean, it's like I get auditions for like homeless guys, junkies, nerdy geeks, you know, in front of computers. You know, this is stuff I get, you know, get auditions for. You know, people just notice that I just kind of naturally have this like gait where I just naturally fall into natural things. You can kind of tell sometimes with like actors like Oscar Isaac who much more easily fall into those like confident kind of roles, that they kind of are working a lot harder when it comes to that, you know, awkward side. So I definitely think is like seeing Mark is like, oh no, that's where Oscar Isaac is shining, because that's where, you know, as an actor, like he falls more naturally into those kind of roles. You know, when it comes to obviously his personality, you know, it just seems he has that kind of more that confidence, probably even in real life, because as actors, you know, it's like you bring real life into what you do. But I did like kind of finally seeing like this like confident character of like, all right, like this is the kind of thing I want to start seeing in Moon Knight. Like I want to see that badass, you know, come out. Like I want to see that guy who's really gonna, you know, really, you know, do some crazy stuff, because you know, even in the comics, you know, things get pretty intense, you know,
absolutely,
a lot of times. And of course, you know, obviously since it's, you know, Disney, they can't, you know, go to the extremes like they could have, you know, it would have been like one of the earlier Netflix shows. But they, you know, can border the line. You know, so it's like, okay, Mark, at least he's very grounded and very stoic. And I'm like, okay, kind of now I'm here. It's kind of how I feel with Mark.
I mean, don't forget as well that, and again, listeners may or may not have watched it as well, but in the lead up to the TV show, we did see Oscar Isaac training for fight scenes as well, and they looked badass. I mean, they definitely looked Mark Spector. They definitely don't look like Stephen Grant stuff. So yeah, there is it seems to be there's more of a physicality coming with Mark, and I think also as well it's a testament to Oscar Isaac with his Stephen Grant. I mean, if we're saying that Oscar Isaac's more comfortable in a role of, say, Mark, I mean, he's been smashing it out of the park as Stephen, because he does, I think, carry that sort of character off really well. Is just and you know, even when he has like these squeals when he's running away from KHONSHU, as we saw in the storage bunker, to his dorky running, that sort of stuff, to him not wanting Mark to have the body at all, this desperation from this guy, and as well, when push comes to shove, when he's with Layla in that warehouse, and she's pleading him to summon the suit or to at least give control to Mark, and he just can't, or he won't. There's that really innate vulnerability for Stephen Grant. We've got a few things here as well. I just wanted to say, this Facebook user wondered if Mark has been at this for 3 to 5 years or so. I did see something online saying, apparently, I don't know how right this is, but they're saying this comic book series is set in 2025. So it's actually after Hawkeye, but it's in the future basically. So they backtracked it and they said that Moon Knight wasn't actually taken away with the blip. He was actually there. He was one of the half of the surviving, you know, population, and he has been doing it for about 5 years. So that's, someone's tracked that, and they reckon so. He's been doing it for quite a while as Moon Knight apparently, but that's all, I guess, speculation. We don't know. But yeah, Joey, so did you have something?
Yeah, I was gonna. You guys actually addressed it already. The comments about this Mark trying to basically have like a, I don't know how else to describe it other than like personality suicide or whatever, which DID doesn't work like that. That's a very sensationalist view of what it is. And I'm really glad that Lena answered that. So it's like you guys answer the question and then Lena answered the question.
Well done. Thank you so much, Lena, as well. Yeah, and here it is as well. It's not really possible, at least in real life DID, to erase or kill an alter while the physical body is still alive. However, it is possible for alters to go dormant will go into a coma-like state and not come out into the external world for years or even decades at a time. There have been some alters in our own system, Lena's talking about, who have done that either because they felt like they were no longer needed or out of guilt for their own actions. So thanks for that insight, Lena. Yeah, very interesting to hear. Very curious to know.
And Ian, you mentioned the confidence of Mark Spector. I feel like that plays a lot into it. Like Mark Spector is self-destructive, but in a very indulgent way, it seems. Like that's why he has his discipline. That's why I think another reason why you see Stephen Grant and how he behaves seems like a reaction to some of the things that Mark does. There's a point toward the end of the episode too where Stephen blames Mark for the responsibilities he can't keep up. Like, oh, you're ruining my life. I can barely keep a fish alive. Blah, blah, blah.
I can't go out on a date. Yeah.
Right. I can't even go out on a date without you. And Mark also, you know, using Stephen as an excuse? Is that a big part of the system here to always try to make, or to try to have one of the alters sort of make up for the shortcomings of the other, but it ends up being like an Ouroboros situation, right? With these two characters, with Mark and Stephen. I don't know if that's going to be true of if there are any other alters in the system, but from what we've seen, that's the dynamic that we have.
Oh yeah. Also, as well, I think it was mentioned. Mark says to Stephen, you know, where the avatar of KHONSHU, avatar of vengeance, our agreement is contingent on Stephen staying out of it. And now we see Stephen very much, for some reason, the walls have come down, and he's actually mucking up, I guess, their perfect agreement. So yeah, that's an interesting point, Joey, and it definitely works both ways for them, for sure, as well. I'll just pop into what I want to do, because I mean, thank you so much for the feedback and discussion, everyone on the social media as well. I mean, we got a vast array of thoughts. I just wanted to give some thoughts here from one of the long-time listeners as well. Like he's written in, Corey Hardiman. So he wrote in for episode 1 as well. He's not enjoying it as much as, say, some other people watching the series. So again, I wanted to just kind of give an all-round flavor for the series as well as this episode. So Corey says, I was hoping the second episode will hook me more than the first one did, but it was more of the same, except for 2 minutes near the end. That was Mark Spector, Moon Knight. In I was talking about.
Yeah.
I may not be a fan of the series so far, but that was my favorite 2 minutes in television history. So, I mean, there's a big words. I mean, to be able to capture that essence of Mark Spector in that is great. I find, I mean, Joey, you've had an awesome kind of pickup with a Houston Finch influence in particular scenes. I love it. I'm getting vibes of Fist of Khonshu, Mensch's Run.
Yeah, man. It's like, I have to say, even if they don't follow some of the storylines or the characters, this show is definitely a composite of everything that has been cut. I mean, you even saw some stuff with the Bemis run. There's visually, there's a lot of Lemire stuff, which I'm gonna spoil it for myself. I'm a huge Lemire run fan. That's what I'm. That's nothing to do with the show. That's my personal spoiler. The Joey spoiler. So like any kind of Lemire stuff, I just eat it right up. And I was telling you guys this before the show, but one thing I just noticed in a rewatch, because I just rewatched it before this, the police detectives, Bobby and Billy from the Lemire run, the orderlies.
We only hear one referred to as Billy, but
that's true. Yeah.
Aesthetically, though, they definitely look like, apart from, I think I mentioned it with Rebecca, apart from the gender of Bobby, they were very similar to the Lemire thugs or cronies or whatever. You see them in the Lemire run pop in and out in different guises, but there is a guy, Bobby's got the big afro, and Billy's like the redhead, and so they definitely looked like that. But once she mentioned Billy, I thought, like, okay, that's got to be them. Yeah, for sure. So it's a great little nods to the series as well. A little shout out to Chris as well. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Good to have you here as well. So I don't know, Ian. do you get the vibe reference wise? Are you picking that up, or is it too distant? Like with the way that Mr. Knight is shown, the way that Steven's been depicted, the costume. Are you finding there too much of a divide?
I mean, I think it almost kind of feels like little things they're doing are kind of like they're pulling here and there, but then it's like on the big scale pictures, kind of that's where they're changing everything else. But then then it feels like they're kind of trying to throw little things in. They're like, oh, but no, we've got to please some fans, so let's try to do this and let's try to do that. I think sometimes it kind of feels there's a divide. Sometimes it feels like, okay, this makes sense. It's kind of a back and forth. Like for me, it's like sometimes at moments I enjoy it. For the most part, I'm kind of like, I kind of feel like it's a show they've kind of gone in a direction of they're trying to pull little things to still try to keep the fans engaged who are already fans of Moon Knight. But a show that as a whole, at least at the beginning so far of what's been seen, I feel like non-fans who know nothing about Moon Knight at the moment are going to enjoy it the most.
Yeah.
Because they've kind of gone in a direction that feels so different than the way most of the comics have been. But I feel like it's the little things, you know, kind of like when like Easter eggs, basically. It's like they're planting Easter eggs everywhere to be like, okay, we got to keep the fans engaged, so let's put the Easter eggs in.
And it's like Moon Knight, honestly, it's such an easy character to incorporate stuff in. There's so much there that's very easy to pull from, like the Crawley thing. And we haven't seen anything with Gina or the kids yet, if there is anything. And so it's like, but you know that those are mainstays in the comics. They're very easy to pull from, very easy things to understand. So I think in a lot of ways, adapting this character, although it might be sort of logistically difficult at times, is free. You have all this stuff, just take it and use it, you know? And I think that's one of the big reasons why this show tells a story that it does, is also representative of what Disney is going through production-wise. You know, they're trying to not tie actors into contracts. They're trying not to make long, drawn-out things. So they're trying to tell these stories that are self-contained, and in that, I think, reflects a lot of more original concepts, for better or worse, right? Because if they just straight up adapted, let's say the Stained Glass Scarlet arc, right? If they just adapted that, then now they have nothing to pull from it anymore. So they always want to leave a ton of openness and like. Yeah, you see that a lot, so much with this show. I think you're going to see it with She-Hulk and Ms. Marvel too, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's a great point as well. It seems as well that the MCU have made this decision where we're going to change it up. I mean, it was vastly successful through phase 1, 2, and 3 of having this this connecting tissue with everything and having actors, you know, locked in for long with the golden handcuffs, as Oscar Isaac says. Now they've made a point of, well, at least for Moon Knight, and I think you're right, Joe. I think later on for Miss Marvel and She-Hulk, we will see a loosening up of that. And since they have a new playground where they're able to jump between movies and TV shows, that is the thing that we'll see. That's the big thing, and that's what everyone kind of wanted with the Netflix shows, but weren't able to do it because of, you know, legal things. But now we have this thing where Moon Knight, and Kevin Feige has said, Moon Knight, She-Hulk, and Miss Marvel, they will start out on TV, but they will transition into the movies, which is a nice little point of difference. So, yeah, we'll have to go see how that is going to pan out. And someone did say, I wonder if they're going to do Midnight Suns.
Oh, it's coming, man.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm hoping
people love Oscar Isaac. They're going to love this character. Even if the show's reception is mid, the character's cool. It sells. It'll sell. Yeah. I guarantee it. It's coming.
I think the show's, doing well, I think, at the moment. You know, another point as well, saying how different it is with the comics. I just wanted to reiterate one of Rebecca's points in that people that will come from the TV show to the comics will be just as disorientated, I think, as well. Like reading the Jed MacKay run, going, "Oh, this is not like Moon Knight from the TV show."
So I don't mean to get too off the weeds, but what I always tell people is read the first issue of the Houston run, then decide what you want to do from there. That's always my plan. If you like the grimdark stuff, continue with that run. If you like the concept of the character and you like more 80s stuff, go start from the beginning, which is one of the best ones too. If you like the psychological element, do Lemire. So I feel like this show being a composite is a really good jumping off point for things that they like. If somebody says, oh, I really like the Omelet stuff, because the Omelet stuff is like, oh, it's cool, it's got Egyptian lore, blah, blah, blah. But like, then you could pick a run off that. Or if like, I really like the psychological elements, then maybe go from Lemire. So it's like, they have this free cash cow to sell comics, to sell subs, you know, like they're going to bring this character into more if they can. And I could be wrong, but it genuinely seems like Oscar Isaac and Ethan Hawke and all the main cast members seem to like being on the show. They seem to be happy with it.
Well, Oscar mentioned, you know, apart from the grueling hours that he had to put into it, and he's never worked any harder in, you know, for any other things. He's absolutely enjoyed every minute of it. So that's a great, again, testament to him really liking the character. I mean, sure, he's one of the producers that might have a
right. That's
something
a big
to do
part
with
of
it.
The post-night clarity is what he's got. But yeah, no, I feel like that model sells itself. Make this an easy thing for actors to work in. They're going to want to come back. They're going to want to do more. Also, just compare this reception and engagement with the character compared to something like Oscar Isaac Apocalypse, which we don't mention in this house.
Exactly. God, I can't believe they're the same person. You know what I mean? Yeah.
But also the Mohammed Diab, he, you know, is a huge proponent of this IP. You know, like, and it's. I don't know if you guys have. I'm sure you have. I think someone posted in the chat, but seeing like Egyptian creatives sort of use Moon Knight as like almost like a community, right? To showcase their talents and stuff is awesome. And I think that gives a lot of representation and a platform for more, especially people, Egyptian Americans, to be able to show their work in a show. And I think that platform will also lead to more things. So.
Yes. Oh, no, yeah, absolutely. I think it's fantastic that they've done that as well. Mohammed Diab as well, talking about getting a more accurate depiction of Egypt. You know, that's it's really good. And of course, as you're saying, the beauty, and we say it over and over again on this show as well, the beauty of Moon Knight, and even you just look at the comic books, it's all so disparate. Like they're all how writers take Moon Knight, and they always inject a little bit of something else in there. The TV show is no different in that they've gone a particular route. They've gone for the Egypt supernatural bent, which is great, as well as the psychological. I mean, they've got components, a bit of everything. But it's I think I just love the versatility of the character. So I think fans may be a little bit more forgiving, because if they've ever read the comic books, they would know that he's this particular way. One volume, next volume, he's totally different. I mean, it surprises me that, you know, a lot of people are going, oh, we need to see Moon Knight rip the face off someone, blah, 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 blah. The Houston run, look, that is just, the Houston run was like 13 issues out of 350 odd issues.
Yeah, and even then, like the latter half of it was kind of messy because it was so different. It was trying to tie into more Marvel Universe stuff than I think a lot of people talk about. Everyone was like, everyone's always like, oh, the Houston run's so dark, and it's like a super psychological. It's like maybe the first 5 issues. I don't know. After that, it's different.
Yeah. I mean, but they're absolutely right in the sense that, I mean, you alluded to it as well, Joey, that first issue, the bottom, did herald in a new modern era for Moon Knight. So that's, I guess, why people, you know, more modern fans will remember him as like this, just jumping on point from the Houston run. But it's certainly very different from all over the shop. So, so we got Helena, I'm assuming.
Such a good point about that. That's so true.
I personally didn't like the Houston run from a mental health depiction standpoint, because it equated over-the-top violence with mental illness way too much. Which is a fantastic point as well. I don't. One of you guys want to? I don't know if you've got it open, so you guys want to take one of the Looney feedbacks for something that you found interesting. Ian or Joey?
I'm just picking up this thing. I just scrolled and I saw Rebecca's comment about the Mark wearing a Star of David necklace in the final scene. Yep.
So we do get the nod to Mark's Judaism as well, which is fantastic. I mean, we've been always, I guess, cognizant of that and whether they would inject that. There was a lot of talk beforehand about Mark being cast, a Jewish actor. Will they focus on that? I mean, there's so much in Moon Knight to focus on. It's hard to kind of keep it all in. But his parents have been cast. We know that. So, I don't know. Ian, did you pick up on that? Are you aware of perhaps just that being the nod so far of his Judaism? And would you like to see more?
I haven't picked up on all the things, just because sometimes when I'm watching it, if I'm just not like invested enough at the moment, I'm not like trying to pick out. Like if I was to rewatch an episode, I might be like, oh, that little thing. But usually when I watch something for the first time, I'm not, unless it's something that's like a bit more like really obvious. Like, here's the thing. For sure. I might not pick up on the Easter egg, and so I've probably missed half of them, honestly.
The beauty of the.
I've got a couple. I could list some. One is he survived the blip in the passport. You can see that the passport.
Yes. Yep.
I mentioned. Well, you see Crawley again, right?
We saw Crawley. Yep.
Oh, this is a big one. Because I just reread Fist of KHONSHU. Best run ever, bro. Check it out. But
it is a good run.
Yeah. Second issue, he's in the Yucatan. Ethan Hawke drops the Yucatan.
Awesome. Nice little pickup. Yes. Wow.
Another thing, this is funny. One of the funniest things in the entire episode that destroyed me was Steven just like fascinated with this goat, and he's like staring at the goat, and then Ethan Hawke's like, "Oh, goat, yes." And I'm wondering if that's like a joke on like Greatest of All Time, that goat. So I don't know. It seemed like it was too like obvious to not be. Something. Also, and then another Easter egg too. They say his mom is still alive, or at least imply that his mom is still alive.
Yeah. Layla mentions it. She's saying, "Oh, you're on speaking terms with her," so she's obviously alive. Joey, I can't believe the goat. I mean, don't we? I thought we all thought that was Mephisto, right?
Yes. Marvel fans have been grasping at Mephisto since 2008. So one day we'll grab it. Like if we grab enough,
there should be a T-shirt for that. Grabbing Mephisto since 2008. For sure. No, the Star of David. Yeah, for sure. And thanks. Yeah, Rebecca pointed that out as well. So absolutely.
So I think it is interesting that they didn't really explore, as far as I remember, a ton of his Jewish roots until the much later comics.
That's true. Let me just think. Well, I mean, Fist of KHONSHU, absolutely, for sure.
Yeah.
I can't remember out of the 38 issues, Joey, in the Mensch run.
No, there's like a thing like, oh, I was born in Chicago with a rabbi father. I think that's pretty much as far as it goes. Yeah.
But the past few runs though, they've heavily leaned into it, and really heavily explored it. And that's when it was cool. Became really, really obvious. Like, oh yeah, I know who's Jewish. He's definitely Jewish. See?
No.
That's interesting because usually most runs we don't get much past his history beyond Mark Spector in that desert dig. Usually we don't get anything about his childhood, and so it's kind of fascinating that they in the past few runs really push that, and that they're obviously hinting at that in the show.
Yeah. Well, it's a nice. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, sorry.
My bad.
Oh no, I was just about to say it's a nice. I mean, because again, there's so many components: DID, the Egypt angle as well. But it's just something rife for investigating as well. And so I love that the Bemis introduce that as well, and Lemire, of course, beforehand as well. We actually see a bit more of it with Elias, his dad, and we see his mum briefly in the Lemire run. So I like those recent the recent focused into the Judaism. Sorry, Joey, you were.
Oh, I just had a kind of an Easter egg too. So there's Vertigo, the Hitchcock film, played off a lot in this episode. The running scenes, the reflections, there's a lot of that stuff.
Okay.
A big one is when he's in the storage locker and KHONSHU comes out, and he's like, comes out, whatever. He's like flipping the lights and whatever. Yeah. There's a kind of corny transition where it like illuminates his face and it's completely
and freeze frame.
And it freeze frame, and it's like, first off, there's a scene in the I think it's issue 6 of the 80 run, the mentioned Sienkiewicz run.
Okay,
That's it's like ripped straight from that, and that was used in the Lemire. I'd have to after the episode, let me sit down and find the photos, because I was like, I took notes on this, so I'll do that when I get a chance.
I thought, because again, I raised that with Rebecca as well, that particular shot, it was just something I wasn't expecting, and I wonder whether the directors were referencing either something on film or indeed the comics. So I'm glad that glad you mentioned that, Joey, because that does make sense. But yeah, actually, Ian, while we're talking about this, I want to put your directing hat on as well. I mean, how did you, unique perspective, how did you find the Benson Moorhead direction of this episode? Was it reminiscent of anything, or can you see some influences?
That's a great question.
Putting you on the spot.
I'm trying to put my director hat on. Yeah. It's
heavy is the crown that we wear.
Yeah. It's definitely a very stark contrast from the first episode, for sure. Because there's definitely far less mystery in the second episode and far more psychological thriller in the second episode. And I'd say in that sense, it definitely kind of felt more akin to that kind of direction of almost like, 2000 psychological thrillers.
Yeah. Which is really that's scary though, because that's like we were talking about that in the chat earlier. The early 2000s, sort of didn't really do a great job with mental illness and psychology. Really, it was all spectacle and shock rather. So hopefully we get the good 0-0s and not the bad ones.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see too, going forward, because I mean, my guess is every episode is is directed by someone different. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes, because it seems that's the one thing with it though is that with that there seems to be a bit of consistency story wise. But style-wise, it feels like it might be a bit inconsistent. And
and you see that with the action sequence in this too. I was just gonna say that the whole Moon Knight action sequence in the beginning of the episode when he's chasing the jackal through the rooftops and stuff, and it's like, man, as cool as that was, it felt like. It felt like copy pasted into it. It felt very patchwork. It felt like, okay, now we have this point A, and then we have point C, and then let's stick in that action sequence there. And it just felt like very style over substance. Like it was cool as hell to see him jump across the building. Like
there was some beautiful shots there. Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, we were talking about this before, so I'm glad that this is coming full circle, but is the payoff there really worth it, right? Like, what if he had been chasing like a person rather than just a jackal or whatever? And so like it really felt like they had this sequence that was sort of pasted there. And I think the director did a good job of trying to accommodate that element or that sequence into it, but I am a little worried that we might see more stuff like that. And a big reason, Ian, I'm sure that you've dealt with this out the wazoo, but just COVID shooting stuff, man. It's a rough gamble for sure. try to get everybody on the same page. Everything's always like a little bit messy now, and
and I think also what happened because of the COVID pause on so much, productions are just kind of going now, instead of taking the time they should to still, take time on certain things. They're kind of rushing into everything. And I mean, I think we're going to see it balance out again soon, since things are kind of, getting back to a bit of a balance. But with production, especially being in LA, you can kind of see how they just kind of like dove back in, and we're just like, go, 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 go. Yeah. Even if it was kind of like, years ago when they had the writers, big writer's strike, and all those like series, had a big drop off of like episodes, and like the writing wasn't as good, and it's kind of like that, except it's being rushed into. So it's like you have people who, have good skills, here and there, but they're rushing it too much. Yeah. Because it's like, it's like they say, it's like you can get, 2 of 3 things, it's like money, time, and there's a third one, and my brain isn't working now. So. But you get the idea.
Money, time, and KHONSHU. Those are the 3 things.
Which, I mean, speaking of KHONSHU,
yes,
I'm not loving the voice.
Oh yeah, the voice has been a bit of a sticking point with a lot of people as well. Sorry, just a bit.
Yeah, I just want to, because it reminded me too much of Venom, and it's just I can't think of anything.
Which the likeness has been been compared as well. Just quickly, just to go back to address your couple of things there, and so it is unfair. I think it is unfair on the directors having to deal with a situation like COVID and stuff. So unfortunately, we may not get the full power of their directing abilities because of the things that are in place with COVID and lockdowns and stuff. Also as well, directing, I believe, and I think Rebecca and we touched upon it, Rebecca's much more attuned than I am. I think Mohammed Diab's doing 4 episodes and Benson and Moorhead are doing 2. It's more or less going to be consistent in that sense between, as consistent it can be. So, I mean, we'll see how we go there. But KHONSHU, of course, that's another point that we did mention. The voice, okay. I like his origin. It definitely shows him as being on the outer with the other gods, which again, and being a liar, which again is so much KHONSHU. So I really do enjoy how he's been depicted as this kind of unreliable god. But Joey, I mean, what do you make?
I gotta stand F. Murray Abraham because I think he's a Syrian, or he's at least Syrian. So I don't know if he's. I remember there was a thing about that. I think his dad was supposed to be. I don't remember. So I had to stand him. I think he's great. I think this KHONSHU voice in this episode is way better than the first one, where it sounded like he was kind of going Tom Hardy Bane. So it was like he combined both Tom Hardy comic book roles, and But I do kind of wish it was more processed, more effects on it, like a lot more subtle. Because to me, KHONSHU is like very concise, to the point, but also sort of speaks in riddles in a way, like it's unclear. It's ambiguous what he says. And I think it's too like overt, like, "You're stupid, Steven. How are you so stupid?" And like again, it's
very snarky.
Right.
I think that's KHONSHU, though. I think that's KHONSHU. Yeah.
I don't feel like he's snarky. Like I feel like he might be like he could, like, snarky doesn't seem right, but almost like, and a humor in a way that would put you down could make sense. But the snarkiness, it almost sounds like Venom.
Like condescending or slightly petulant, but not like just definitely like petulant. Quippy. Yeah. I do wish he would, like, I kind of wish that it was less frequent too. Like, he only said one line and that's it. And then like they let cinematography speak for a lot of what he does. And by that, I don't just mean the big things like the light flashing, like something out of the ordinary, like something that there could have been a lot of different, more subtle ways that they did the KHONSHU thing. But, I do love the bird, man. I gotta say, it's kind of.
I love the design. The voice is the only thing that irks me about KHONSHU at this point. It's only the voice.
But we'll see. It's going to be difficult to say exactly how I feel until the show wraps up about the voice. But like, I'm very hot and cold on it. Like, or rather lukewarm. I'm lukewarm. I haven't been like super into it, but F. Murray Abraham is a great actor. Got a really commanding voice. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't think he has a bad tone for the voice. I just don't think they ended up.
Right.
The execution was not quite right.
Yeah.
Was the issue.
Yeah, I think, again, it's such a hard thing, especially for maybe comic book fans who have been following and reading about Khonshu in the comics for a long time, and then to finally have him heard. It's a hard thing, right? Because you have an abstract thought in your head about how he should sound. You may not have been considering how he should sound, but we're now being told this is how he sounds. I can totally understand how jarring that can be as well. What do you think of the little slight twist? Well, there's two twists. Number one, I'll shoot towards you, Ian, as well. Number one, Arthur Harrow as a previous Avatar, and number two, Layla as potential successor or someone that Khonshu wants as an Avatar. How are you finding that injected into the story?
That hasn't jarred me. And I think the biggest reason is because some of the more recent runs in the comics, they kind of get into some of that kind of stuff with other characters essentially being either, the kind of idea of other avatars, and even in Origins, the fan film we're working on, we kind of took that idea of when Mark finds the weapons, of this idea of there could have been a previous avatar, and that's why all these ancient weapons, he finds them when he reawakens. And even, in the comics, having this idea of even like avatars of like the sun god. And so them kind of going in that direction, that hasn't fazed me at all, because they've really kind of started exploring that stuff in the comics too. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense, because if one guy could be the avatar of Khonshu and he's only alive for one lifetime, why couldn't someone else be the avatar of Khonshu, who's like an Egyptian god that's been around since ancient times?
I feel like if Bemis and Jason Aaron hadn't introduced that into the comic canon lore, and maybe a little bit more of a sticking point for people watching the show, comic fans, because there was no legacy character mentioned before. Although we have the ultimate universe, right, with the different Moon Knights, but that's kind of different. Joey, what did you make of this as well? I mean, also as well, like I think there's been some rumblings of fans afraid maybe that Layla will become Moon Knight.
That goes back to the production logistics too. Is Oscar Isaac going to continue? I feel like that's a big thing. And I feel like that they dropped that there so they could always, work off that if they need to. But to me, I read it as a kind of abusive thing. Because, I mean, Khonshu is straight up gaslighting Mark and the whole system. Really. Exactly. Because he goes, bro, he's like, it's so scary. Anyone who's been in an abusive relationship, it's like, the red flags. And, I mean, granted, Khonshu's a malevolent god deity, right? So it's a little different for sure. But he goes, don't think that this is your body. That's my Khonshu impression, by the way. Don't think that this is your body. And then a second later, the audacity of this bird dude goes, "You're worth protecting, though. You're worth protecting, King. Let me lift you right up." And it's like, bro,
yes. What are you doing? And also, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, and also the fact that you have one last mission for me, but as soon as you're done, I'm gonna look at your girlfriend or your wife, and I'm gonna take her. So there's that kind of blackmailing as well. He's not a good deity, which again I love, to the fact that we all love to hate Khonshu. So they're doing a pretty good job at it. Anything on the Arthur? I mean, Arthur Avatar Joey as well, like that reveal that came.
I mean, it's like, because Arthur Darrow is like a throwaway nothing character in the comics, basically. A product of the 80s, right? So I feel like that there was definitely when the character was originally first shown, and like they were saying stuff about him in press releases and whatever, I was like, okay, so are they mixing like the Seth stuff with Sun King? You know, and so we'll see what happens. You got to stop me here. I can't. I don't want to destroy anyone's.
Okay, yeah, sure. Okay, definitely, yeah. We'll put a lid on that. Cover.
But I can't believe he's both Leonardo, Donatello, Michelangelo, and Raphael. It's really crazy how Ethan Hawke plays all four of those. The voices are really good.
He does very well, especially with the bow stuff.
Ian, you were saying that you had some issues with like the original characters in the show. How do you feel about Arthur Darrow?
I mean, my so even though I've read the majority of Moon Knight comics, my mind remembering all the smaller characters is limited. So I honestly at the moment I'm like, oh wait, which character is that? So I'd have to go look him up again.
I mean like in the show proper.
In
the show. I mean in the show, I mean, I think he's fine. I think it's kind of a interesting approach they've kind of decided to take with kind of like making this character almost like this, like, you know, let's balance out, you know, humanity kind of character. Like, let's try to like, I've got to make sure people are balanced and not, you know, evil everywhere. It's like, it's making him kind of like a weird, like, he's not an antagonist. He's like an anti-hero.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird because also Moon Knight's an anti-hero.
Yeah.
It's sort of Diet Thanos in a way, though, right? Like
it's
sort of
really,
I mean, it without sounding totally evil or whatever. I mean,
oh no, Ray's Joker moments coming up.
No. But I mean, like with Thanos, you get the logic with him, right? You know, resources, you know, kill off half the universe. Terrible, of course. With Arthur, I can't. I mean, I love him as a villain, but I can't get on board his concepts. And I think that was highlighted with Stephen going, so what? You're going to kill a baby, like just because they're going to be evil, do something evil in 30 years' time? I can't get behind what he believes, and I think that is a defining difference between Arthur and Thanos. But certainly I do see the connection there, Joey, between Arthur and Thanos.
He
wants the biggest difference between the two of them is it's a religious difference.
Oh, interesting. Yes. That's a really good point. Yeah. I keep forgetting he's a cult leader.
Yeah, I mean, basically, because when you think about what he's doing, like what he's doing is very religious, is what he's doing. And that's so essentially it's like Thanos, you know, his principles come from just this idea of, you know, things of humanity and a balance, whereas obviously Arthur's, you know, beliefs very much come from a religious background of, you know, a belief system, you know, which obviously follows, you know, some kind of deity, which is, you know, an Egyptian deity.
This is why the Jewish aspect of his character could have been so good here, man, to provide some kind of contrast because contrast because there's this really good dialogue that he has with Arthur when he's in the compound, which is funny, and everyone's watching that like the dolphin thing. Which another Lemire reference. Look at all these.
Oh no, that's Bemis. Yeah.
Oh, Bemis. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's right. Bemis. Yeah. But he has this like really, really good dialogue that was like almost peak, but then it just pulled back when they're talking about vengeance, and he's like, you know, like because he's not Mark Spector, or Mark Spector's not there. It's Stevens talking, right? Yeah. So I wish that there had been more of a discussion on that, and this is why I wish we had seen a little bit more of Moon Knight proper before this conversation. It feels like that conversation had happened way too early in the show. We assume these things about Mark and Moon Knight and whatever, but we don't see them. So that confrontation, because that's a confrontation. That's a big confrontation.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
And the pressing and challenging of ideas there is great. And even though it's a little watered down in the context, I do think it's effective. But think about how much more effective that would have been if you know, we actually had that moral dilemma. And I think that was Marvel almost stepping back because they didn't want to retread. They've been so careful not to retread a lot of what Batman does and a lot of what Daredevil does.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think that's honestly at their detriment, you know? Like,
yeah. It's a missed opportunity for sure. Absolutely. One of the things I loved about that interaction, and as you say, it is a confrontation. It was a really cool scene. Again, Oscar Isaac, you know, doing his best. I loved it how Arthur's trying to sell his beliefs to Stephen, and it's obviously not working. So what does Arthur do? He just goes, "You see that stuff? You see what that can do?" You know?
Yeah.
So he ends up being kind of physically threatening, and everyone takes a step back. It's because he can't win that argument against Stephen. But as you say, Ian, he is very much a zealot. That's why we see him at the beginning of episode 1, which I've discovered just recently. That was Ethan Hawke's idea of introing Arthur Harrow with that silent, 5 minutes at the beginning. That was all his idea. Yeah, he was saying, this is why I was really loving the collaboration with Marvel, because they said, yeah, let's put that in there. That's pretty good. So from that point, it seems like Marvel Studios are really making it a collaborative effort with the actors. But I think that sells a point with what you're saying, Ian, and I think that's a tremendous point about it being a religion, which is a total different kettle of fish compared to Thanos. And yeah, that again, that actually probably just raised my opinion of Arthur Harrow, even more now about his beliefs.
That's kind of why I wish he wasn't an Avatar, right? Like, I mean, I guess it is not. He does. You don't know that for sure. I guess you could be questionable narrator, blah blah blah. Oh, yeah. But I kind of wish he was just religious guy in a way. And I feel like we keep talking about Fist of Khonshu in the chat and in this podcast, but one of the things I think Fist of Khonshu does that kind of waters down Moon Knight, even though I do actually enjoy that little brief stint, but it adds too much supernaturalness to, I think, what is in essence a street level story.
Yep.
Right. And I think that you can still up the stakes, but also make it a street level story. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, going back to that costume change thing, Ian, and I still am holding out for a street level costume at the end of it. I could be totally wrong or not. Fair enough. But I remember Jeremy Slater saying, and him going through the experience of generating that costume, is that he didn't want Mark to be in the situation with, there's crime, let me just hold on while I get changed. I think that's totally fine.
Why that is a thing. That's a thing that I'm fine with, like,
why
them
avoid
having
that?
the suit.
No. I'm saying that let them have it. I mean,
interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I don't care about those, and then people will say, how did you get into that costume so fast? I don't care. I mean, like,
it's a comic book movie, man. Yeah, like, suspend the disbelief. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been doing that for ages. It's like, it hasn't phased us. Yeah, I mean, every once in a while people are like, that's ridiculous. But then we keep watching it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but having said that, I am warming up to this transformation that Mark. I mean, look, he's a supernatural. This is the background that they're going on. We got hello, Rebecca. Oh no, but Rebecca, we did mention the Star of David thanks to Joey. Yes, we made that call out. Rebecca was too distracted with Oscar in that final scene.
Yeah, I understand.
But yeah, I don't know if anyone wants to grab. I'm just going to go through like a comment, just a couple more comments. We can talk about this forever. I'm sure, but I'm just mindful of both of your times as well. Look, I'll just jump in with one. I'm trying to get all different flavors. Dan Ross from our Facebook group says Mr. Knight presented here is pretty much as different from the comics as is Stephen Grant being a gift shop employee rather than a multimillionaire. Mr. Knight is a mastermind and man of the people, not Mr. Sad Milquetoast accidentally in a wrong supersuit. Plus, isn't it is. Yeah. Plus, isn't Mr. Knight its own alter? Look, I'll edit it. He's not Stephen Grant under the hood. final. Anyway, I never thought there'd be any type of Moon Knight show or movie or anything like that until this actually happened. So while I'm pointing out that these things hits me, I have no preconceived dreams or hopes shattered by them playing it how they are. I'm enjoying it, so bring it. It's all good. So thank you, Dan Ross, for that. Yeah, so someone else again, Mr. Knight, obviously, I think was the major point of discussion potentially in this episode too. Joey, any other thoughts from the Loonies that you may want to highlight, or if you have any other points that you want to raise?
Yeah, I think so. Frank here was talking about how he actually liked the fight scene, because this is I like to make contrast.
Yeah, for sure.
Contrasting points to what I was saying. So he's like, I thought it was funny that that's what Steven saw himself as, the psycho Colonel Sanders or whatever, which I thought that line was hilarious. I don't even care. And Mark's disapproval of it, it gave him confidence, like him kind of like being...
When he whacked that guy, and then Mark, the reflection, Mark was like pretty happy with him.
Right, and it's like, it also kind of shuts down Mark a little bit, because he's like, oh, look what I can do, and Mark's like, oh, I guess you could punch this jackal. So I think that's a really good call on that. And I'm also reading a lot of comments talking about how they're disappointed with how certain characters or certain things are adapted, and there's a lot to try to parse there. But I think when the show was first announced, my instinct was actually, even in the Netflix Daredevil, when Daredevil was first introduced, I was like, and they hinted at Moon Knight at some point, because they said that there was a street level character they were interested in doing. And then when Daredevil season 1 came out, I was like, dude, I want that for Moon Knight so badly. And once I sort of put that away, that expectation that it was not going to be that away, and it's really similar. It's very similar to what I imagine people who read the Mention Sienkiewicz run were thinking when Fist of Khonshu came out. Because if you look at those two runs, one is like, Fist of Khonshu is very, like kind of, it's about to be the mid 80s, early 90s, edgy, like ridiculous era, right? And and then I think the Mention Sienkiewicz run was or volume 1 was very dark and sort of expressive, abstract at times, still very 80s, but whatever. And I feel like those are the two genders, right? Like the two expectations that you have. I think there's an interesting dynamic with that. So once I started to try to just be like, okay, it's a Disney show, what could Disney do well with this? I started to see a lot of good in it. Like even the Mr. Knight stuff that kind of sucks at times, I think I still feel like it pulls people into the character and establishes an audience and a tone, which, again, it's an adaptation. This is not going to change what the comic character, maybe it might influence future stuff
a little bit. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. The Blade example is always good here, right? The Wesley Snipes Blade. Retroactively.
Robert Downey Jr., Iron Man, absolutely changed the comics. The Tony Stark in the comics.
Yeah. So I will say, I do want to say, no matter what I like or dislike in the end of this, by the end of this show, the thing I'm happiest about is that the show happened. Yes. Because for so long, this is bringing Moon Knight to the public eye, so that people are now going to ask, oh, who's Moon Knight? Oh, now I have an idea of who Moon Knight is, because even when I was shooting this fan film for Origins, it was constantly like, who's Moon Knight? Who's Moon Knight?
Yeah.
And I'd have to be like, this is who Moon Knight is. And so at least this gives a lot more eyes to who this character is.
Oh. Would you say that was like an influence for what you were trying to do with your stuff, Ian? Because it like to try to bring awareness rather than
that's a good question.
Adapt, I guess.
Oh, 100%. Because the thing about my fan film, so the thing about this show is it's very much an adaptation. Like they've taken a lot of creative liberties. The thing about Origins, it's a fan film that is being made for fans, but also purposely the origin story to put out there more awareness for this is the origin of who Moon Knight is from the comics, because I pulled directly a lot of stuff from the very first comics and the very original origin stories of Moon Knight that, you know, very much is like we took very little creative liberties. We took a couple just because of what COVID threw at us. But outside of that, even with those slight creative liberties, we still tried to be very true to the heart of even like who these characters were in this. But like the story we're telling is like, this is basically stuff that happened in the comics. Yeah. Because it basically pulled directly, like even lines, dialogue, you know, like specific events that happened in comics. It may not be, you know, comics all like right in a row, but it's like throughout different runs, these events happened in comics.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, that's I'm looking forward to it when it comes out. Cannot wait. There is a teaser or trailer of it available as well. So again, I think I'll add that into the links too. Yes. So we'll chuck that in the show notes as well. Have a look at it. You get to see Mr. Knight on the not Mr. Knight, Moon Knight on the streets in action.
Yeah, and it gives you a sneak peek at the kind of action that's going to be in the full short.
Yeah.
Ray, I have to ask you, because this is not your first adaptation rodeo. You've seen a comic book movie or two. What from when film started to adapt comic books until now? How has that been for you to see and to have a character whom you're so intimately involved with? I mean, you started a Moon Knight podcast and you have 270 episodes. Like, how has that been for you? Like, what has that like changed your expectations or anything like that?
It has more recently. I mean, to be really honest as well, I mean, I come from the camp of continually trying to manage my expectations because I do expect, I know the adaptations and I know they're not going to be the same, but as a comic book reader predominantly, I do like expect to see like an accurate depiction from the comics. But as time goes on, and especially with Moon Knight, I've kind of just really embraced this is going to be different, because that anticipation of the Moon Knight show coming up, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm a little bit anxious as to know how far of a departure it will be from the comic book. So it's like, I've got to really steel myself and get ready. So yeah, I mean, the Moon Knight TV show has definitely really changed my eyes. I've always had this thing in the back of my head, is like, it's an adaptation like Wolverine. I'm a big Wolverine fan. Hugh Jackman, great job. Of course, there are massive differences in the movie. I'm happy with that. I've never actually hated like a movie because it's departed from the comics, so I guess that's a good indication. But
you hate me for my casting as Logan. I understand.
You are perfect, Joey. I don't know.
Thank you, Ray.
I'm just waiting for a cigar, like in your mouth. And
I hate smoking, so that's not going to happen. That was part of my clause, unfortunately.
Well, maybe an eye patch. I don't know.
That works. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's probably an indication. But there's always a little bit of me. My default is like, okay, how accurate is it with the comics? But I've learned to loosen that up. It's fine, and since I'm loving this Moon Knight adaptation as well. It shows that it doesn't have to be. Again, this is just for me, and listeners out there, I know there are plenty that want a super accurate Moon Knight for that, but it's just me. As long as you get that spirit of the character, which I firmly believe is within the show, that is enough for me. And you have KHONSHU there, you have this whole thing about the Mark Spector Merc past. I mean, the bones are there for sure. So I'm not too swayed by the differences. Well, I think any other final thoughts, guys? I mean, we do have. Thank you so much, everyone, for all your live comments and for the massive amount of comments in our social platforms. Hopefully, that has generated conversations. I know it has amongst all the loonies. But I guess for any final thoughts for, I'll start with Ian, because I know, Joey, that you have seen the other episodes as well. Ian, thoughts of where to from here, and your not expectations, but your thoughts on what may lay ahead.
Yeah, I'm definitely working on not having expectations at this point. I think I'll also enjoy it far more not having expectations in the last 4 episodes, because then I'd just be like, whatever happens, just try to enjoy it. But I'm kind of at a point of like, all right, I'm intrigued to see where they take it. And kind of like pulling back to be like, all right, I hope I end up really enjoying it by the end. Because right now I'm just kind of in the middle, and so we'll see how I feel by the very end of the show. Because right now it's just all right, 2 episodes. Like if I wasn't a huge Moon Knight fan, I might have paused and just waited a little bit to continue watching. But since I'm a big Moon Knight fan, I'm like, no, I've got to see what they do with this.
Well, that is a good point as well.
It keeps you going every Thursday, man. I get it.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people saying as well, like such a slow start. I mean, again, there's such vast differences as people come to it. I'm enjoying the character development and stuff, and of course the bias of being a Moon Knight fan like you, Ian, that does color my approach to it.
And I'm even more biased because I'm making a fan film.
Yeah, well, I mean that as well. I mean, you'd be watching closely, I think, to it. Joey as well, without spoiling anything, as expectations of what's ahead. It's hard to say that because you've seen this.
Splinter getting the suit, man. I'm not really into that either. No, I think the biggest thing that this show hasn't. I mean, first off, there's 2 things rather. I just hope that they approach the mental health aspect as, I hope that's okay, because and I know they did a lot of work, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be okay, right? And I think that there is genuine moments where they approach that in a good way, like because Steven actually wants to turn himself in so he can help himself, and he even says, "I'm not broken, I just need a little help, maybe." And to me, that's a perfect representation of something that maybe Mark Spector would say. So that leads me into my second point, where I want them to be able to capture the aspect of vengeance and justice in an interesting and compelling way that's mature and not just Disney, right? And that's my biggest ask for that, for the show, for the character, for this production, rather. And I hope that they can make that work in the confines of what they're doing.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point as well. It will be interesting to see how they do portray that vengeance and justice as well. I mean, that's a very big part of Moon Knight, as we all know. And we've only really skimmed the surface. They've only really mentioned it in my work with KHONSHU. That's what Mark would say. We haven't really seen him go to town because they kind of caught up. We were caught up with Steven's journey, so to speak, in at least these first 2 episodes. But a huge thank you to both of you guys as well. It's awesome chatting with you finally again after such a long time. I'm hoping you guys are open to come back on again for maybe more of the show, some comics or whatever.
Man. Thank you for having me on again. It's been too long, always a pleasure to chat with you, and you too, Ian. Nice formally digitally meeting you.
threw you guys in together. You hadn't met before. I should have introduced you, basically.
Yeah,
that's right. Missed out on that.
It's a ball pit of a podcast. We'll figure it out.
How you bond in the mire.
That's it. But a huge thank you. Before we go, if anyone wants to make any Spectre calls, Ian, anything that you want to plug coming up?
No, I mean, it's just continued eyes on the Origins project, really, at this point. Also, I mean, of course, also there is the Black Knight project I'm involved in too, but that's about it at this point.
Yeah. No worries. We'll keep track of it as well. I'll keep close contact with you as well, Ian. So any updates and stuff, we'll be sure to add into the show. And look, I'm a big Black Knight fan as well. So bring it on. I haven't got his first appearance because it's like thousands of dollars. Jeez, but anyway, I wish I had. facsimile of it. Joey, yourself, anything that you want to plug apart from your debut as Logan?
Oh yeah. So keep in mind for that the Wolverine solo film that it's just me. It's a one act play or one character play. No, so I do Jump and Shoot, which is a gaming podcast, and we do Super RPG Friends Thursday nights on Twitch, and we stream RPGs and talk about them. And also, I'll be launching something very soon, hopefully, which is going to be sort of like a big streaming podcast thing happening. Would love to actually talk about Moon Knight on it at some point. So, Ray, I may hit you up. Ian, I may hit you up.
Yes.
I will, rather, not may. I'm just trying to sound mysterious. But yeah, thanks again, dude, for having me on. It's always, like I said, it's always a pleasure to chat with you. It's always illuminating.
Illuminate. Oh no, always great. It's always good to have such differing and different perspectives as well. So a huge thank you. And again, Jump and Shoot, check it out in our show notes as well. Look, I won't bore everyone with the details of the outro again. It's all in the show notes. It's all where you can find us. Please hit us up. Just visit our social media platforms as well. A huge thanks to all our sponsors, Drew, Daniel, Frank the Tank, also CLZ Comics and Dreamland Comics, and a big thank you to all our patroonies as well, and an extra shout out to our latest one, Odin Sword. Thank you so much for all your support. As always, just keep on checking out our social media pages. Thank you so much, Chris. Oh, God, I've got to thank Chris as well. The awesome animation. Chris, I don't know if you saw it in time, but you shocked Joey and Ian with that Moon Knight transition. So thank you so much for the awesome animation. But yeah, check out all our notes for where you can find us. It's pretty easy to get a hold of us. And with that, a huge thank you once again. And we'll be back for, oh my gosh, we've got another comic book, Black, White, and Blood, to review next episode. But then, of course, we'll be getting into episode 3, the reaction episode, and another panel discussion later on in that following week. But with that, a big thank you. And as always, may KHONSHU watch over the denizens of the night. Catch you later.
And affiliated characters, stories and events are properties of Marvel Characters Incorporated. Materials used and discussed within the podcast are intended for critique and review purposes only under the fair dealing concept of the current Copyright Act. The views, information or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the copyright owners.
Hi, I'm Pax.
And I'm Abigail.
Welcome to Ghost Spider Groupies, a podcast dedicated to Gwen Stacy of Earth 65, also known as Spider-Gwen and Ghost Spider, where we review her comics, discuss news, and give our opinions about all things Gwen 65.
Right now, we are reading through Gwen's main solo series. Each week, we break down a new arc and discuss our and the listener's thoughts. Tune into each episode and come on this journey through the character's history with us, available wherever you listen to your podcasts.